What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today I thought we'd have a little bit of fun and do a review. We've not done a review so far, so I thought we'd have a review of the Marvel Champions 4 Hero Pack. And unfortunately, we need to start off by saying that this is the worst hero pack we've had so far. Now, huge giant caveat here, I'm talking out the box. Out the box, with the deck as it is, I have played all the heroes many times. 4 is the weakest of them. Let me explain to you why I believe that is. You see, first of all, 4 has got a hand size of 4 in hero mode and 5 in alter ego mode. That is low, ladies and gentlemen. That is low. It's not good. Now, we do see this with other characters, of course. We see that other characters have low hand sizes, but actually not in alter ego mode. All the other alter egos have a hand size of 6. So it's kind of annoying that you don't. It's actually really annoying that you don't. And yeah, sure, there are a few of the heroes out there that have comparatively low hand size, as much as it goes. I mean, we look at something like She-Hulk, for instance. We see a hand size of 4. Hand size of 4 is low, but She-Hulk's got a really high attack. And when you flip to hero mode, you deal 2 damage to an enemy, so you don't mind so much. It's a little bit sad. Now let's go back to 4 as a whole. There's nothing that 4 does particularly well. I've said about the low hand size, but we've got attack of 2, defense of 2, and thwart of 1. So the attack isn't that high, the defense isn't that high, and thwart is very low. And this is one of the other things that really makes me sad about 4. We don't have good options for thwarting. And if you've played a few games with 4, you will have realised that actually it's not particularly great. I mean, when we look at Odin's son, you got a recovery of 4, which is okay to be fair. But you search your deck and discard pile 4 Molyneux, and you add it to your hand. Now that's nice, and it means you can keep doing that over and over again. That is one of the cool things that I do really like about 4. Molyneux is something which I think you can hang your hat on, so to speak. And it does give you +1 attack and give you the aerial trait. So now all of a sudden you do have an attack of 3, and it's starting to look a little bit better. So now you've got the same attack as She-Hulk, but you've got a higher hand size. The problem is we just do not have good options for thwarting with 4. And that is my biggest issue, I think, with him as a character. You're just not thwarting. Now again, we're talking about the deck that you're playing out of the box here. But you're also starting off with a low hand size in alter ego mode. And this is a problem. Because essentially what you end up doing is spending the first couple of turns desperately trying to get some cards, desperately trying to get rolling, and you end up not actually being able to do so that quickly. And then, of course, because it takes you a little bit of time in order to get going, you end up actually in a little bit of trouble. And you need to start thwart. Oh. Yeah, see where we're going with this, ladies and gentlemen? That's the big issue we've got here. It's not necessarily that it takes a couple turns to get rolling with the low hand size, but it's a combination of the low hand size taking a couple turns to get rolling, and then having bad options for thwarting and getting out of it. That's what I think ends up really getting us into trouble here. And we have some options for building up our hand size, but they're too expensive. Way too expensive. We've got Avengers Mansion, which comes in the deck and lets you draw a card, but that's a 4 cost. We've got Asgard that gives you +1 hand size, but that's a 3 cost. And bearing in mind, we don't have many cards. We've got 5-card hand in alter ego mode, we've got a 4-card hand in hero mode, and we're expected to be spending 4 on an Avengers Mansion and 3 on an Asgard. And yeah, sure, if you get both of those cards out, you've got a respectable hand size, but that's not making me happy here. Now, if you compare that to something like Iron Man, yes, okay, I grant you, Iron Man has a very low hand size in hero mode until you get a bunch of armor on, But his armor's pretty cheap. And then you've got really good stuff you can do with the armor, including extra thwarting. Mark V helmet is a 1 cost that lets you remove a threat from a scheme, and if you've got the aerial trait, you are actually removing 2 threat from a scheme. So actually, that's why we don't mind with Iron Man. You can take a turn or 2 to get rolling, but then you can actually have a really good hand size in hero mode while having all the extra tricks from your armor, so you're absolutely fine. To go back to Thor, everything's just a little bit expensive. You know, you've got cards like Defender of the Nine Realms, which does let you remove 3 threat from a scheme, but you've got to discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until you discard a minion, and then you put that minion into play engaged with you. And then you get to remove 3 threat from a scheme, and it is free, you don't have to pay anything for it. But the problem with this is that firstly you have a minion engaged with you, which means you've now got to dedicate resources to getting rid of that minion, and secondly, you're running through the encounter deck a little bit faster. You might end up discarding 6-7 cards in the encounter deck until you hit a minion. You might not, but you might. And if you're discarding too many cards in the encounter deck, then you're getting closer to an acceleration token. Remember, every time the encounter deck runs out and gets reshuffled and rejigged, you add an acceleration token, which means you're taking even more threat every turn. That's my problem, ladies and gentlemen. We've got Chase Them Down, which is free, and after you defeat an enemy, you remove 2 threat from a scheme, but you've got to draw in to chase them down as you're defeating an enemy, and that's not always going to happen. Plus, of course, we've got these expensive cards that you need to try and actually get into play. And it ends up going pretty wrong pretty quickly. This is my issue. I mean, if we start having a look at the allies here, Heimdall's a really nice ally, but it's a 5 cost. And yes, you've got an attack of 3, but there's 2 damage that you've got to take in order to do that, which is kind of annoying. Hercules, really good, but it's a 6 cost, and you do reduce the cost to play it by 1 for each minion engaged with you. But this is kind of what I was saying back with Defender of the Nine Realms. If you've got 4 minions engaged with you, then all of a sudden you've got to get rid of those minions. Because if you don't, they're going to be thwarting and they're going to be attacking, and it's going to go pretty wrong pretty quickly. Don't even start me on Loki. Now, I love Loki, right? Mechanically, Loki is amazing. But 2 scheme, 2 attack, 4 health, and when Loki would be defeated, you discard the top card of your encounter deck. If it's a treachery, you heal Loki, and it doesn't go away. And I think that's a fun mechanic, but it's kind of piling on in a deck which is very hard to pilot to start with. One of the only really fun tricks I've picked up playing it is Lightning Strike, and I do love Lightning Strike. Lightning Strike lets you spend X energy resources, and you deal X damage to the villain and each minion engaged with you. So you can potentially be doing like 4 or 5 damage to the villain and each minion. So, look, I've had a couple of games where, you know, I've played 2 Defenders of the Nine Realms and removed a bunch of threat, and then taken advantage of playing Hercules nice and cheap, and then been able to sit there and just get rid of all of them in one go with Lightning Strike, but it doesn't happen all that often. My experience of playing with Thor has been very simple. My hand size is low. It's hard to get going in the early game, especially when a lot of the cards are very expensive. Or they're cheap, but they've got gigantic downsides / you can't use them now. And then I finally get up and rolling, and there's so much thwart on there, or there's so many minions engaged with me, that it just goes a little bit wrong. I mean, if we look at all the allies that you get in the deck as it comes out, you've got your 6-cost Hercules, your 5-cost Heimdall, and the nice cheap 4-cost Lady Sif. And look, it's a 2 thwart, 2 attack, 3 health, and when it enters play, she enters play. Bit rude. You ready for or Odinson, you know, depending on which mode you happen to be in, but that's not the point here. It's a 4 cost. And if you had a hand size of 6 in each mode and some decent draw, we'd be loving it. But in games where I've actually managed to get Asgard and Avengers Mansion down nice and early, so that I can get a decent hand size, I've been so far behind by the time it happens that it's basically irrelevant. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. I still like the hero pack. I'd still recommend buying it. I still think that the Molyneux mechanic is really fun. I still think that Loki is the most inventive nemesis we've seen so far. I still like playing the deck. I still have fun playing it. But you can't play it out of the box. You need to take all of those cards you've got that are 4, and you need to get rid of the aggression cards that come out of the deck, and you need to make sure you're chucking in some justice cards. You need to go and get yourself some nice, cheap allies. You need to make sure that you've got some support and that you've got some thwarting. And if you rebuild the deck so you've got a bunch of allies that can block the minions that are running around, yes. And if you've got some cards that can thwart and help you out, yes. But you've got to remake the deck out of the box, or you're going to have an awful lot of games where it takes you a couple turns to get going, and then you finally get going, and you realise that the threat on the scheme is so high, there is absolutely no chance that with the cards you've got, you're going to be able to come back against it. Sorry, but I'd like to know your experience of playing with 4. I'd like to know if you agree with me or disagree with me, so, let me know in the comment section. Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy. That's where we talk Marvel Champions and any other card games that take our fancy. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get weekly bonus podcasts, all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.